Hello, I'm Jared McNett, a politics reporter for the Sioux City Journal and frequent guest on the On Iowa Politics podcast. I'm here today to chat with the newly elected Iowa House District 1 Rep. jd-scholten, who will be serving his first term in the state legislature in 2023. Hello, JD.
Hello.
Just in case there might be some folks who aren't familiar with you somehow, how old are you? What sort of work do you presently do, and where do you live?
Well, 42 years old, live here in Sioux City like I have most of my life. I am a consultant on many different things, but just recently working on the Franken for Senate campaign as a political director. And I also run an economic populist newsletter called You're Probably Getting Screwed.
And what exactly is the focus of that newsletter then?
It talks a lot about how working class people are getting left behind in the economy when we have multinational corporations. We're seeing record profits out there. And so when we talk about inflation, that's something that a part of inflation we're seeing is corporate greed. And they say there was a study that showed up to 60% of inflation. So going to the grocery store, you go to the meat department, 4 companies control 85% of the beef industry. So, they can jack up prices all along the supply chain. And it's one of those things where what I have been talking about for years is we need to decentralize our food system. We need to make it more regional. I think that would have huge effects here in Sioux City and in the state of Iowa. And it would be a national security issue as well.
And you've run previously for Congress in 2018 and 2020. What made you want to give campaigning another shot and run for the state legislature in this cycle?
I didn't until Chris Hall called me and told me he wasn't running for re-election. Mm-hmm. And I immediately told him I was not interested. But then down at the state capitol, that was the same time when they started attacking teachers. And I come from a long line of educators and farmers. And it just was one of those things where, our state quarter is foundation in education. My grandmother, who was my biggest influence on me, was a public school teacher. And the last thing she told me to do was to take care of our farm. And that kind of ultimately led me into running for politics. And so when I saw that kind of happening, and after, 2018 was a pretty special year in campaigning, even though we didn't win. We moved the needle 24 points, and just being able to build something out here in Western Iowa as a Democrat, I didn't want to just leave that all and just let it be when there's still a fight to be had. And so when Chris called me, even though I initially said no, I slept on it a couple nights, and then I was like, I got to do it. And so I'm excited to go down to the state house and represent Sioux City, the place that I love, and to be a voice for Sioux City down there, and be a voice for Democrats in Western Iowa.
Yeah, and you've obviously already mentioned a couple different political issues already here that you're passionate about. With being elected to the Iowa House, what are you intending to make your top priorities in the coming year?
Well, it's going to take a lot of working across the aisle with stuff, because we'll be in the minority. And so you got to find what things we can collaborate on. I think one thing that we should be talking about is campaign finance reform. In Iowa, there's no limits. And so let's say Governor Reynolds can take $1 million donation from somebody, and and then in return, they can have a no bid contract, in which some of Governor Reynolds donors have gotten no bid contracts. And I think that's unfair to the state and unfair to taxpayers. So I would like to see some form of campaign finance reform. Another, I push for public education and healthcare, making sure everyone has healthcare, but those are the things that the Republicans don't seem to be wanting to move on. And so I don't know how much we can go there, but those are things I'll be fighting for. And I think the one thing that this might be, I'm horribly biased on this, I used to be a professional baseball player and love the game, fighting to end major league blackouts. in the state of Iowa, we don't have a major league team yet. 6 different media markets we are blacked out of. So we cannot watch, even though you buy a subscription to MLB TV, you cannot watch the Royals, the Cardinals, White Sox, Cubs, Brewers, or Twins. And I think that's wrong. And so going after Major League Baseball is something I'm interested in doing. And again, it's pretty esoteric for baseball fans, but to me, it's a larger picture. It's multinational entities like Major League Baseball. They have an antitrust exemption, so they can make their own rules. And this is one of the things that ultimately, just like we all are consumers at grocery stores and how prices raise for them, this is a form of that. And so I'm hoping to just do what I can from the state ledge to get bipartisan support to help baseball fans watch their teams.
And there were a few sort of Siouxland specific questions based on reporting we've done. I was hoping to ask about, and I know I've seen you talk about some of these before. The first one was, we reported in October that Tyson Foods was going to be moving hundreds of jobs from the Sioux City area to Northwest Arkansas. And I'm wondering, what role is there for a person in the Iowa legislature to kind of work to make sure those sorts of things don't happen to communities around the state?
I mean, this goes back to creating a regional food system, because and we had one, and this is kind of my point, is like, so originally IBP started in Denison, moved its headquarters to North Sioux City, and then they got bought out in 2001 by Tyson. And so when you have these multinational corporations buy the local companies, they have no loyalty to this district or to this area. And so they can move jobs at a whim, and it hurts a lot of families. I talked to a woman who is really having a difficult time because she's about 10 years away from retirement. She doesn't want to start a new job, but she also doesn't want to move to Arkansas because her family doesn't want to move down to Arkansas. They love it here. And so she's really stuck in a hard place. And so these corporations, I mean, they can offer a severance package and stuff like that, but that's not going to matter. I mean, it's not going to have the same intent of working at a place that you've been there since you started working. And so that's one thing I would like to see. To me, there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table when it comes to regional agriculture. I wrote a paper and submitted it, and they gave a presentation on this back in March at a conference for USDA out in Yale University, and talking about the need for regional food systems. And like, we're missing out on millions and millions of dollars in the state. And those are some of the things that I would like to see. And I would think I could get some bipartisan support on this, because they would be huge for the regional economy. And we saw during the pandemic, people are very interested in where their foods are coming from. And yet 90% of the food Iowans eat is imported. So let's find a way I mean, we have all this amazing farmland out here. Let's tap into that and have more of a regional food system.
And another farm related question for you then. We've had more than one story run in the Journal about farmers in the area still having to contend with drought conditions. I don't know if there's a quick fix to that necessarily, but what would you like to see done to address those issues and to maybe alleviate some of the pressures that farmers are currently having to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, talking to some farmers this summer, saying like at the bare minimum, they need 15 inches of rain in a strategic time period, and they only got 3. But yet they're having, by the grace of God or by some modern miracle of science, that they still have a decent enough yield to make some sort of a profit. I think that's one thing that we really need to look at, is where we're going in agriculture. There was a study that showed that there's a possibility that kids who are born today will live in a lifetime where corn is not able to grow in the state of Iowa, and that's because of climate change. And so that is something I'm extremely worried about. And having ability to pass on the family farm, we got to make sure soil health is a priority when it comes to this, because that's something that's that I've seen out in the whole state, that we got to start promoting making sure the soil's healthy so we can pass it on to the next generation. The other thing that really worries me that I don't think is getting talked about enough is farmland ownership. Now, in the state of Iowa, it is illegal for a foreign entity to directly own a farm. But however, they can hide it in LLCs. And so we got to come and across the nation, foreign ownership of farmland is larger than the size of Ohio. So I'm extremely concerned by that. Again, it gets to a national security issue. I mean, we already know, like with hogs, 1 in 4 hogs is owned by China and Smithfield. Half of when I mentioned 85% of the corporations, or 80% of the meat markets owned by 4 corporations, 2 of those corporations are owned by Brazilian entities. And so, like, I really worry about where our food comes. How are we going to, in case there's another pandemic, in case there's anything that we can't foresee in the future, that we have adaptability. And so that's one thing that I want to be focused on. And I think it starts with land ownership, because we see the average age of the farmer is north of 58 years old. In the next 20 years, and this is a study from Iowa State, we're going to have the biggest land transfer in Iowa history and in American history, with farmers retiring or passing it on to the next generation. And so I want to make sure that Iowa farmers continue to farm Iowa land.
That actually is anticipating the next question I had for you. We also had a story not too long ago about a record-breaking auction price for farmland up in Plymouth County. That was over $1 million for about 55 acres. And in that case, it was local farmers. But I'm wondering, one thing that some of our readers expressed concern to us about is that if those are going to be farmland prices going forward, how can small family farmers break into the industry in Iowa in the future? Do you have that concern too? And how can those kind of fears be allayed legislatively?
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I mean, it's because ultimately what happens, we're seeing this is private equity is buying farmland. And I mean, it's pretty well documented now that Bill Gates is the largest farmer or farm owner in this country. And so, again, it gets back to when entities that are not local own these things, they care less about the communities that these things happen in. And it's to me, it's very similar with the Tyson jobs moving to Arkansas. They care less environmentally. You look at like a Dollar General going into a small town, undercutting the local grocery store, so the town loses its grocery store. Dollar General pays $8-9 an hour without benefits, and so people are having to work another second or even a third job if you're going to work there, and the money that goes to them, it goes out of the community. So we need to focus, I think, prioritize a regional system when it comes not only to agriculture but in an economy, and that's something that I'm very much focused on, and like keep on bringing up that next generation. It's difficult. I remember doing a town hall, I believe in Charter Oak, where a woman was in tears because she said her son just graduated from Iowa State, and she doesn't have the heart to tell him that there's no money in their farm for him, they're going to have to sell the farm because it's get big or get out. And it's really, we're having it. I mean, we're past a pivotal time, and we need to start making some drastic decisions here because of, I mean, we're hollowing out our communities. We're these get bigger, get off the farm policies. I mean, when I ran for Congress, I talked in Palo Alto to Roger Walker, who was the last dairy farmer in Palo Alto County. We used to have all types of dairy farms, and now it's being so concentrated. And one of the things we're losing out on is down in Arizona and California, they have these huge cattle lots where, I mean, they're struggling for water, and we all know how much water needs to be consumed in order to produce milk. And so if they're going through drought, we're going through drought. But like we used to have the way I like to say it is, you have a choice to have thousands of farms with 100 head of cattle, or what's happening now is just hundreds of farms with thousands of head of cattle, thousands upon thousands. We're talking like 15,000 heads on some of these places down in the Southwest. And it just, if a disease goes through there, we become very vulnerable. I mean, the baby formula, I'm a little jumping all over the place here, but the baby formula, when the supply chain issue happened, that is driven by policy issues. It wasn't, we had one plant that went down in Michigan and it disrupted the entire industry. There's so many more industries that are like this, and milk is absolutely one of them, where just one little thing. We saw it in beef in 2019 when the Holcomb fire down in Kansas, when that plant went under, it disrupted the entire meat industry. And so those are some of the things that I'm focused on, and making sure that Iowa's strong. And I think it starts with regional, being more focused and minded on regionalism.
Mm-hmm. And then one other issue that's come up in some of the other candidate discussions I've had, and also deals with land, is the use of eminent domain to build carbon capture pipelines. There are at least two such projects currently progressing in our neck of the woods. I'm wondering, where do you stand on the use of eminent domain for such work, and what can be done about that legislatively?
So there's I think several layers to this. So that project itself, I think, is very short-sighted, and there's other ways that we can use carbon capture, and we can use it coming straight directly off of the ethanol plants. For example, I know down in Des Moines with their waterworks system, they use to filter the water to make water drinkable down there, and they use the CO2 from ethanol plants. The other part of it is is that how much the studies are not showing that this project will actually help combat climate change. At best, it'll be maybe neutral. And so I have a really hard time supporting this project. But if, like I said, I'll be in the minority down there. If it passes and they get to use eminent domain, I want to make sure that we have union workers, local union workers, getting these jobs. But ultimately, I view this whole project as a very short-sighted solution to a much larger issue.
And then you touched on this a little bit ago as we've been chatting. How are you kind of hoping to make some of these things a possibility if the governor's race, the Iowa House races, and the Iowa Senate races don't end up producing Democratic majorities? Is it still feasible to make some of these priorities a reality in that situation?
I will say I'm naive in the sense that I haven't been down there yet. And I'll be honest, I'm not I've only been to the state capitol about 5 times in my life. And so going there is going to be a new thing for me, and having to work with people all over the political spectrum is going to be a challenge. But it's one of those things where I don't care who gets credit. If Governor Reynolds writes executive orders banning Major League Baseball from blackouts in Iowa, I'll applaud it. I don't care as long as it gets done and it benefits Iowa. Some of the things that I see happening they're not benefiting Iowa. That's the thing that's going to be hard if I have a limited voice there. But at the end of the day, that's what the job's about. And it's part of my job is to help influence in getting folks to understand some of these issues. And if it means getting some new people down there and having more folks who are like-minded, who are willing to get stuff done, I'll be working each campaign season to help get more folks elected that are more like-minded. And so that's kind of my strategy going down. I'm not going down there with an agenda to do anything outside of my capabilities, but I'm optimistic that at least some of this stuff I feel I can get done that you'd think is traditionally bipartisan.
jd-scholten, those were all the questions I had for you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you as always.